Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. I bear witness that no one deserves to be worshipped except Allah Ta'ala, the one who has no partner and no similar, the one who has no length and no width and no depth and no perimeter, the one who is not a volume and is not in a place. And how could he be in a place when he existed before time and space? He created everything except himself, including you and your actions. Nothing occurs except by his will, both good and bad. He destined to happen. He speaks without sound, letter, or language, not Arabic, Hebrew, nor Korean. He's not light. He's not a spirit. He has nothing in common with human beings. He's not in the direction of up, down, right, left, front, nor back. And whatever you imagine in your mind, Allah is different than that. And I bear witness that our noble, unrivaled master, Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is the slave of Allah, his final messenger, and the best of all of God's creations. May Allah unite us with him in paradise and grant us a drink from his basin. And may Allah increase us in patience, humility, knowledge, and comprehension, and help us to put our knowledge into practice and grant us all sincere intentions. Ameen. We're continuing in the book, The Straight Path, As-Siratul Mustaqim, written by the great scholar of our times, the Shaykh, the Muhaddith, Abdullah al-Harari. May Allah have mercy on him. Ameen. We've reached page 175 in the book. Page 175 in the book. Page 175. The author, may Allah have mercy on him, says, Al-Bayhaqi narrated from Ash-Shafi'i. So what's about to come are 4 lines of poetry that were written by Imam Ash-Shafi'i, rahimahullah. And Imam Al-Bayhaqi, may Allah have mercy on him, is narrating this poetry that Imam Ash-Shafi'i wrote. These lines of poetry deal with the subject of destiny. It says, Al-Bayhaqi narrated from Ash-Shafi'i that he said, when he was asked about destiny, ما شئت كان وإن لم أشأ وما شئت إن لم تشأ لم يكن خلقت العباد على ما علمت ففي العلم يجري الفتى والمسن على ذا مننت وهذا خذلت وهذا أعنت وذا لم تعن فمنهم شقي ومنهم سعيد وهذا قبيح وهذا حسن. It means, O Allah, whatever you willed was, even if I did not will, and whatever I willed, if you did not will, it shall not be. You created the slaves according to what you knew, and according to that knowledge runs the young and the old. You have endowed upon this one, and that one you have forsaken, and this one you have empowered, and that one you did not empower. So among them are the wretched, and among them are the happy. And this one is ugly, and that one is beautiful. This is the meaning of the poetry that Imam Shafi'i, rahimahullah, authored. And so if you understand these lines of poetry, we're going to talk a bit more about what they mean. But if you understand these lines of poetry, you'll see that Imam Shafi'i is among those scholars who basically, when the subject of destiny comes up, he says, well, destiny, it goes back to the attribute of knowledge. Okay, he says destiny, ultimately, it goes back to the attribute of knowledge, that Allah knows everything that will happen, including the future, and it's impossible that Allah would be wrong. So therefore, the future cannot be any different than what Allah knew would happen. Okay, so destiny, Imam Shafi'i is among those who relates it to the attribute of knowledge, mashallah, which is one of the very easy ways to think of it, And it's one of the very easy ways to disprove someone who does not believe in destiny. You know, if you encounter someone who doesn't believe in destiny, the easy thing to do is just to ask them the question, does Allah know everything, including the future? This person, you expect he will say yes. And if he says no, then that person blasphemed right then and there and stopped being a Muslim. But after he says yes, that Allah does know everything, including the future, then the next question you ask him is, does Allah will himself to be ignorant? Does Allah will himself to be ignorant? Meaning, would Allah will to happen something other than what he knew would happen? And the answer, of course, is no, because Allah is not attributed with ignorance. So once the person answers these two questions, that Allah knows the future and that Allah does not will himself to be ignorant, then the only conclusion you can make at that point then is that the will of Allah is in agreement with the knowledge of Allah, and what happens in the world is in agreement with the knowledge of Allah, and therefore that everything that will happen all the way, period, not just to the day of judgment, but even after that, all throughout the hereafter, everything that will happen, Allah knew it would happen in eternity before creating the world, and Allah willed for it to happen in eternity before creating the world. And this ultimately is what we mean when we say destiny. Okay, we're saying that Allah in eternity willed for all of this stuff to happen. MashaAllah. So if you relate destiny to knowledge, it becomes very easy to grasp that destiny is something that's real and that it could not be any other way. Okay, it simply doesn't make sense for a person to believe that the things in the world are not destined. Because to believe that, you would have to believe that Allah is ignorant of the future. Let's keep reading. MashaAllah. I thought there was more explanation of the lines of poetry here. Let's go back and let's talk through the lines of poetry then. Page 175 at the bottom. It starts by saying, "Oh Allah, whatever you willed was, even if I did not will." So this first half of the first line, what Imam Shafi'i is saying here is that the will of Allah is what happens. And the will of the slave is, you might say, beneath the will of Allah. Okay, what the slave wills will only happen if Allah willed it to happen. This is what it means when it says, "Oh Allah, whatever you willed was." Okay, whatever Allah willed to be, that's the thing that actually will exist. He says, even if I did not will, means even if the will of the slave is different, it's the will of Allah that will happen. He continues in the second half of the first line, "And whatever I willed, if you did not will, it shall not be." Meaning that the slave has a will, and he uses his will to will things. Okay, but if whatever the slave willed, if Allah did not also will that same thing, then this thing that the slave willed is not going to happen. Because the only things that occur are the things that Allah willed to occur. As for the things that the slave wills, well, whatever agrees with what Allah willed, those things will happen. And whatever does not agree with what Allah willed, those things will not happen. They're not going to occur. Second line, he says, "You created the slaves according to what you knew." So here Imam Shafi'i is saying to Allah, you created the slaves according to what you knew. So the people that Allah created, he created them with the attributes that Allah knew in eternity they would have. He created them with their attributes of, size and shape and knowledge and beauty and strength. And he also created the wills that they will have. Okay, because the human being is attributed with a will. And just like all of the other attributes of the human being, that will is created by Allah. So Allah created the humans according to what Allah knew in eternity. So the humans that he creates are going to make the choices that Allah knew in eternity that they're going to make. It says, and according to that knowledge runs the young and the old. Okay, so what that means is all of the humans, they will act like their choices, the decisions they make, the actions they do in their lives, it's going to play out according to the knowledge of Allah, according to what Allah in eternity knew would happen. Okay, and this is something that's complete. It covers all of the human beings. We know this because Imam Shafi'i said, the young as well as the old, they act according to the knowledge of Allah. Okay, so the very young, even if they were just born 1 second ago, the very old, even if they're going to die 1 second from now, like all of the human beings, their behaviors, their actions are playing out according to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew in eternity. Then Imam Shafi'i said, you have endowed upon this one, and that one you have forsaken. So here Imam Shafi'i is saying that the world, the universe, is created according to the way Allah willed for it to be. And Allah did not will for everyone to be the same. Okay, Allah willed for some people to be blessed. That's what it means when it says you have endowed upon this one. Meaning you've blessed this one, you've given that one good things. It says, and that one you have forsaken. This other one, Allah did not give that one the same blessings. It says, in this one you have empowered, and that one you did not empower. Meaning, again, some of the creations, Allah gave them help. Meaning help to do what's good, help to do what's right, so that they would be successful. And there are others whom Allah did not give help to. Meaning Allah did not give those ones the ability to obey him. So they're going to be doing sins. And they're going to be drowning in sins. Possibly even the worst of all sins, which is kufr. And Imam Shafi'i then says, so among them are the wretched, and among them are the happy. So among the human beings, among the slaves, there are some who are wretched, meaning that they're going to go to hell. And there are some who are happy, meaning that they're going to go to paradise. It says, and this one is ugly, and that one is beautiful. Okay, meaning the ones who go to hell, they're ugly. Okay, Allah created them ugly. And I'm not talking about they're with ugly faces, that the physical beauty is ugly. No, we're saying that they are ugly. The actions that they did are ugly actions. They did the actions that lead a person to hell. And that one is beautiful, meaning that one, the actions that he did are the actions that lead a person to paradise. Okay, when you understand these 4 lines of poetry, it's Imam Shafi'i saying that Allah created everything according to what he knew in eternity and according to what he willed in eternity. And among what he willed is that some people will go to paradise and some people will go to hellfire. That some people will be guided and some people will be misguided. MashaAllah. Page 176. The author, may Allah have mercy on him, continues. He said, by this it becomes clear that the pronoun in the saying of the exalted, yudillu man yasha wa yahdi man yasha, which means he misguides whomever he willed and he guides whomever he willed, goes back to Allah, not to the slave. Okay, this ayah of Quran, and there are many ayahs similar to it. This ayah of Quran, it says, yudillu man yasha, which means Allah misguides whomever he willed. The question here is this word he. Who is it referring to? We know, we the Sunnis, we know that Allah misguides whomever Allah willed to be misguided. This is the meaning of it. Allah misguides whomever He willed, meaning whomever Allah willed to be misguided. Okay, but there's a group of people, and we're going to talk about them in a second. There's a group of people, they deny that. There's a group of people, they don't want to believe that Allah misguides people. So they interpret this ayah as meaning, yudillu man yasha. They interpret it to mean that Allah misguides whomever He wills. They understand it as meaning that if the slave wills for himself to be misguided, then Allah will misguide him. وَيَهْدِي مَن يَشَاءُ. They say, and that part means that if the slave wills for himself to be guided, then Allah will guide him. So when they read the ayah, يُدِلُّ مَن يَشَاءُ وَيَهْدِي مَن يَشَاءُ, to them, they understand it as meaning that if the slave wants to be misguided, Allah misguides him. If the slave wants to be guided, Allah guides him. So it's as if they're saying that the will of Allah follows the will of the slave. But the reality is that the will of the slave follows the will of Allah. The will of the slave is under the will of Allah, not the other way around. It's not that the will of Allah depends on the slave's will. No, that's not how it works. Let's read that again. It says, by this it becomes clear that the pronoun in the saying of the exalted, yudillu man yasha wa yahdi man yasha, which means He misguides whomever He willed and He guides whomever He willed, goes back to Allah. That the He here and He willed, it means Allah willed. It says, not to the slave, as claimed by the deniers of destiny. Okay, so there are people who deny destiny. What do they claim? They claim that in this ayah, the word, the pronoun He, which is not explicitly written, but it's like hidden within the verb. They claim that the pronoun He refers to the slave. Okay, but we know it actually refers to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How do we know it refers to Allah? It says, as proven by the saying of the exalted, informing about what our master Musa said. In hiya illa fitnatuka tudillu biha man tasha wa tahdi man tasha. This ayah, let's read what it means. It says, which means, certainly, that issue is the tribulation that was created by you, O Allah. You misguide by it whomever you will, and you guide whomever you will. This ayah of the Quran here, this one, it's, like I said, it's similar to many of the other ayahs that mention Allah guiding whomever He wills and misguiding whomever He wills. But this one is not in the third person. This one is in the second person. Musa alayhi salam is talking to Allah. He says, you misguide whomever you will, and you guide whomever you will. Okay, it doesn't say, He didn't say, oh Allah, you misguide whomever like He wills. It doesn't say you misguide the one where He wills misguidance for Himself. No, it's second person throughout. It says you misguide whomever you willed to be misguided, and you guide whomever you will to be guided. So it's very clear that the subject of these verbs, to misguide, to guide, and to will, the subject of these verbs is all the same, and the subject of the verbs is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah is the one who wills what the slave will be in terms of being guided or misguided. And Allah is the one who creates in that slave guidance or misguidance. Continuing, I'm on the bottom of 176. The author, may Allah have mercy on him, says, likewise said a faction attributed to Amin Shaykh, those whom their leader today is Abdul Hadi al-Bani, the one in Damascus. So there's a group of people in Damascus. They're led by a guy named Abdul Hadi al-Bani, not al-Albani, the Wahhabi leader. This guy is Abdul Hadi al-Bani. Okay. And he is a follower of a guy named Amin Shaykh. Amin Shaykh. Okay. This is a misguided group of people, and among their misguidances is that they deny destiny. Okay. They used to say that the ayah, كَذَلِكَ يُضِلُّ اللَّهُ مَن يَشَاءُ, means that the slave is the one who wanted to be misguided. Now, there are some people, mashallah, there are some people, they try to argue about this. These people who deny destiny, they try to argue about this using Arabic language, using the rules of grammar, a science called nahu. And they say that according to the rules of Arabic, a pronoun refers back to the most recently mentioned thing. And so when they look at these ayahs, they say, yudillu men yasha. The verb yudillu, which means he misguides, it contains in it a pronoun referring to Allah. Allah misguides. And then comes the word men. Men is a pronoun, basically meaning who or whomever. Right? In this case, men is in the accusative case. It's a direct object. So it's saying Allah misguides whomever. And then the next word is yasha'u, which means he wills. He wills. And so there are some people, some destiny deniers, they will take this word he wills, and they will say that this verb has within it a hidden pronoun, he wills. And they say, according to the rules of Arabic grammar, this word he should refer to the most recently mentioned antecedent. And the most recently mentioned antecedent is the word men, whomever. So they say, by rules of grammar, it must mean that Allah misguides whomever willed. Like they think it means Allah misguides whomever willed for himself misguidance. They try to say that. MashaAllah. But, you know, this argument of theirs, which is true generally speaking, their argument is not very strong, because the rule of Arabic does not say that the pronoun must always refer to the most recently mentioned antecedent. Rather, the rule in its complete form is that the pronoun refers to the most recently mentioned antecedent unless there's a dalil to suggest otherwise. Okay, so if there's a dalil, if there's some kind of evidence in the context or whatever, if there's reason to believe that the pronoun does not refer to the most recently mentioned antecedent, then you don't say it refers to the most recently mentioned one. And this is such a case. And what are one of the dalils that it doesn't refer to the most recently mentioned one? It's the other ayah we read, the one about Prophet Musa alayhi salam, where he addresses Allah in the second person and says, Tudillu biha men tasha wa tahdi men tasha. It says, you misguide by it whomever you will, and you guide whomever you will. This ayah very clearly states that that the doer of the guidance and the misguidance and the willing is all the same doer. MashaAllah. Let's keep reading. It says, they made, talk about this group that follows Amin Shaykh, the followers of Abdul Hadi Albani. What's their error? It says they made the will of Allah subservient to the will of the slave, such that the verse's meaning, according to them, is that if the slave willed the guidance, then Allah willed to guide him. And if the slave willed to go astray, then Allah will misguide him. Hence, they have belied the verse, وَمَا تَشَاءُونَ إِلَّا أَن يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ, which means you do not will unless Allah wills. Okay, this ayah, which is a very important ayah, I cannot stress how important this ayah is. It means, this ayah confirms that the human beings have a will. Okay, it says you do not will except what Allah willed. Okay, so it confirms that the humans have a will, and it confirms that Allah is attributed with a will, and it confirms that the will of the slave is under the will of Allah, meaning the will of the slave depends on the will of Allah, not the other way around. So these people, these destiny deniers, who tried to use like Arabic nahu to misguide people into thinking that Allah guides the people if the person chose to be guided. No. Okay, that person is making the will of Allah subservient to the will of the human, when in reality it's the reverse. It's the will of the human that's subservient to the will of Allah. It says, if some of them try to use a verse in the Quran to prove the opposite of this meaning, it is said to him, the Quran is consistent, not contradictory. Okay, so whenever someone wants to say that the will of Allah is subservient to the will of the human, or something to that effect, you can always just cite this one ayah. وَمَا تَشَاءُونَ إِلَّا أَن يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ. Okay, because this ayah clearly states the will of the slave is under the will of Allah, and the Quran does not contradict itself. Thus, there is no verse in the Quran that is contradictory to another verse, and this is not an issue of the abrogating and abrogated. That's another thing they might throw at you. They might try to say, oh, well, that ayah is abrogated. That one about the slave, that the will of the slave being under the will of Allah, they might try to tell you that one's abrogated by this one that they're pointing to try to say that the misguiding of Allah follows after the slave willed for himself to be misguided. They might try to claim this is a case of abrogation. If they make that claim, then how do we refute it? It says, and this is not an issue of the abrogating and abrogated, because abrogation does not apply to the convictions. Okay, abrogation is not something that occurs in beliefs. Okay, abrogation happens in commandments and prohibitions, where we could be commanded to do one thing, and then at a later point in time, Allah would reveal a commandment that replaces the earlier commandment, or a prohibition that replaces an earlier prohibition. For example, but it's the commandments and prohibitions that are subject to abrogation. The belief of the Muslims does not change. It does not get abrogated. It says also, abrogation does not dictate contradiction. Therefore, abrogation does not apply to information. Okay, so in the Quran, there are some things that are just information. Like there's parts of the Quran that tell us things that happened in the past or things that will happen in the future. These things also are not subject to abrogation, because the history isn't going to change based on new information. Like if a new revelation came to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying that Musa never lived, that doesn't abrogate the earlier revelation that says Musa did live. Okay, this is an impossibility. Okay, because the historical truth is one fact, and Allah does not lie. Okay, so abrogation cannot occur in cases where Allah is giving information, because the information doesn't change. So you wouldn't get a later revelation contradictory to the first revelation when it's giving the same information. Okay, this is something that can't happen. It says, rather, it applies to the order and prohibition. Abrogation is only the clarification of the expiration of the judgment of a previously revealed verse by the judgment of a subsequently revealed verse. MashaAllah, the sentence is very precise. Okay, he's saying that it's not that one revelation replaces another revelation. It's not that the subsequently revealed verse replaces an earlier verse. No. What does he say? He says, abrogation is when the judgment that is, in a subsequently revealed verse clarifies that a judgment in a previously revealed verse no longer applies. This is abrogation. An example of abrogation would be like the ayah in the Quran in Surah Al-Baqarah that says when a man dies, his wife needs to stay in the house for a period of 1 year. This ayah is abrogated by an ayah on the previous page, which says that when a man dies, his wife enters a waiting period of 4 months and 10 days. So the 4-month and 10-day waiting period abrogated the 1 year long waiting period. Okay, so one ayah was revealed, one revelation contained within it a judgment, a commandment that the widow waits for 1 year. A later revelation came and contained within it a judgment, in this case, a commandment that the widow waits for 4 months and 10 days. They can't both be true. So it becomes clear that the more recently revealed revelation is the one that you follow now, and the earlier revealed revelation, that judgment is no longer in effect. But notice it's not that the ayah replaced the ayah, because both ayahs are still present in the Quran, and we recite both of them. Okay? It's not a revelation replacing a revelation, rather it's a judgment within a revelation, clarifying that a judgment in an earlier revelation does not apply anymore. MashaAllah. The author continues, this is despite the fact that this group does not believe in the abrogating and the abrogated. Okay, so after saying all of that, Shaykh Abdullah, may Allah have mercy on him, said, and by the way, this group, the followers of Amin Shaykh, they deny that abrogation exists. Okay, they don't believe that there is anything abrogating nor abrogated in the Quran. They deny it. Okay, but nonetheless, in a stubborn effort to try to be right, they might throw at you, they might claim, just to throw you off, that the ayah, وَمَا تَشَاءُونَ إِلَّا أَن يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ is abrogated. So what do we say to them? No, abrogation does not occur in the beliefs. Okay, abrogation is something that can only occur in commandments and prohibitions. The Shaykh, may Allah have mercy on him, continues. He said, among their amazing stupidity is their interpretation of the saying of the Exalted, وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا, which means Allah taught Adam the names of all the things, that it means the perfect names of Allah. Okay, these guys, the followers of Amin Shaykh, they claimed that this ayah, وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا, they say it means that Allah taught Adam Allah's perfect names, al-Asma'ul Husna. They say that's what it means, that Allah taught Adam those names. Okay, even though the belief of the Muslims and the well-established tafsir of the ayah is that Allah taught Adam the names of all things. Of all things. So Adam was able to name things. If an angel were to ask, what's that? Adam could tell you the name of it. If an angel asked, what's that? Adam could tell the name of it. And this was knowledge that was not given to the angels. Okay, so this is a special blessing that Allah gave to Adam as the first prophet. And it was a sign of the very high status that prophets have. It's also a sign to us that a major reason for their high status is the knowledge that they have. It should not be lost on any of you that our Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that the prophets do not leave behind gold nor silver, but rather they leave behind knowledge. Okay, knowledge is a very important component of the high status that the prophets have. MashaAllah. Okay, but these guys, the followers of Amin Shaykh, in addition to denying destiny, they also claim that the meaning of this ayah is that Allah taught Adam his perfect names. The Shaykh says, had it been said to them, had these names been the perfect names of Allah, Allah would not have said, فَلَمَّا أَنْبَأَهُمْ بِأَسْمَائِهِمْ, which means, so when he informed them of their names. Okay, the ayah in Surah Al-Baqarah that we're referring to, it starts out by saying that Allah taught Adam the names of all things. And then after it says, فَلَمَّا أَنْبَأَهُمْ بِأَسْمَائِهِمْ. So when Adam informed the angels of the names of those things, it says, بِأَسْمَائِهِمْ. Okay, بِأَسْمَائِهِمْ. It says, if the meaning of the ayah had been that Allah taught Adam his perfect names, then the ayah, the completion of the ayah would have said, فَلَمَّا أَنْبَأَهُمْ بِأَسْمَائِهِ. Or actually, it would have said, فَلَمَّا أَنْبَأَهُمْ بِأَسْمَائِي. All right, it would have said, when he informed them of my names. Okay, it would have said, if the meaning had been the names of Allah, it would not have said their names. It would have said my names. Okay, so this is one of the clear reasons that this is not the correct tafsir of the ayah. And the Shaykh is saying here that if someone would have just said that to them, they would have been silenced. It says, he would have said, when he informed them of my names, they would be silenced. Despite that, they insist on their ignorance and perversion of the Quran. MashaAllah. So they insist that they continue distorting what our Prophet taught, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay. Among the other crazy things that they say is they deny that Allah tortures anything. Okay, they deny that Allah tortures, even though it states very clearly in many places of the Quran that Allah created hellfire and that hellfire is a place of torture. They deny that Allah tortures anything. So one of the ayahs that you can throw at them is the ayah, يُعَذِّبُ مَن يَشَاءُ وَيَرْحَمُ مَن يَشَاءُ. This ayah from Surah Al-Ankabut. It means that Allah tortures whomever He wills, and Allah shows mercy to whomever He wills. These people, this group is a perfect example of people who lack sincerity. Okay, the sincere person, like the scholars of the past, what do? They read the Quran, they recite it, they memorize and study the hadith, and their goal is trying to understand what is the message that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam were conveying to us. So they approach the text with an open mind, allowing what's actually in the text to guide them to their conclusions. This is what the person of sincerity does. But the person of insincerity, what does he do? He has in his heart from the beginning something that he wants to believe. And then when he reads the Quran or reads the hadith, all he's really doing is looking for evidence to support what he wants to believe. And he skips right over evidence that points away from what he wants to believe. Okay, he's picking and choosing. This is what the person of insincerity does. All right. We don't want to be a person of insincerity. We want to be a person of sincerity. Okay. And so for those of us, like all of us here, those of us who are muqallids, who are not mujtahid scholars, what that means is in our sincerity, we acknowledge our station. We acknowledge that we're not the high level scholars who can interpret this deen on their own. So instead, we follow what they said. As for the high level scholars, we see in them the sincerity that is required. And so those are the ones we want to follow. All right. We don't follow scholars of today or so-called scholars of today who their teachings go against what the scholars of old said. Okay. In this case, we know that there's something insincere about them. We don't follow people like Ibn Taymiyyah, the one the Wahhabis call the Shaykh of Islam. We don't follow people like that because he went against the consensus in approximately 60 different issues. And the consensus is guaranteed to be right. So the minute he disagreed with the consensus, if he had been sincere, he would have acknowledged that that means he's wrong. The sincere person would say he must have misunderstood something. He must have misinterpreted it because it goes against the consensus. And the consensus is always right. But is that what Ibn Taymiyyah did? No. He went against the consensus and considered the consensus to be wrong and himself to be right. Okay, this is a level of stubbornness and arrogance which, would not be found in anyone who is truly the Shaykh of Islam. MashaAllah. Let's keep going. It says Al-Hakim. Al-Hakim is one of the great hafiz of this ummah. He was a very high-level hadith scholar, qualified to grade hadith. Al-Hakim is one of the main sheikhs of Imam al-Bayhaqi, and he's the author of a very important book of hadith called Al-Mustadrak. Al-Hakim, may Allah the Exalted have mercy on him, narrated that sitting in the Rawda was Ali al-Rida, son of Musa al-Kadhim. This man, Ali al-Rida, is one of the descendants of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's Ali, the son of Musa al-Kadhim. This Ali, they call him al-Rida, Ali al-Rida. It says he was a young man wrapped in a wool shawl. The people were asking him while the sheikhs of the scholars were in the masjid, meaning like the big scholars of the day, like the sheikhs of the scholars would be in the masjid, but the people would come and ask Ali al-Rida their questions instead of asking the big sheikhs. This tells you something about him, mashallah. He was someone who had a great deal of knowledge and someone who had the restraint to not speak on something if he didn't have knowledge about it. And of course, he had the piety that's so well known among the descendants of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It says he was asked about the qadar. He was asked about destiny, to teach about destiny. It says, and so he said, Allah said, Innal mujrimina fi dalalin wa su'ur yawma yushabuna fin nari ala wujuhihim dhuqu massa saqar inna kulla shay'in khalaqnahu biqadar. Which means certainly the criminals, talk about the kafirs, are in a state of misguidance and destruction. The day when they will be dragged in hellfire on their faces, it is said to them, taste the touch of hell. Certainly we created everything by qadar. Okay, these ayahs, in particular the very last one of the three, it states very explicitly that Allah is the creator of everything and that he created it with destiny, with qadar. So we understand from that destiny exists, meaning that everything that happens is destined. And we understand from it that everything in the world is created by whom? By Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, people who deny destiny, usually the reason why they deny destiny is because they don't want to believe that Allah is the creator of evil. But this ayah very clearly says, Inna kulla shay'in khalaqnahu. It says that Allah says, we created everything. Okay, this means without exception. Everything that's not eternal, Allah created it. That includes the good and the bad. And he said what? Biqadar. He created it with what? With destiny. Okay, with destining. Okay, meaning Allah destined everything that will happen. After saying that, Ali Ar-Rida said, then Ar-Rida said, my father used to mention from the route of his fathers. Okay, so Ali Ar-Rida, who was descended from Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam through the marriage of his daughter Fatima with Ali ibn Abi Talib. Ar-Rida said, my father, talking about his father Musa al-Kadhim, used to mention from the route of his fathers, meaning the father in a line that goes back to Ali ibn Abi Talib, the cousin of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the door to the city of knowledge, Ali ibn Abi Talib. He said, my father used to mention from the route of his fathers that the prince of the believers, Ali, meaning Ali ibn Abi Talib, used to say, certainly Allah created everything by qadr, even stupidity and intelligence. And to him is the will, and from him is the ability to do good deeds or refrain from the bad deeds. So one of the things that Ali ibn Abi Talib used to teach is that everything is by qadr. Everything. Every single thing that happens in this world was destined. He said, even stupidity and intelligence. So even like the mental faculties of the human being is something that's destined. He says, and to him is the will. Okay, this means that Allah has a will, and everything that happens by the will of Allah. And he says, and from him is the ability to do the good deeds or refrain from the bad deeds. It means that, what Ali is saying here is the well-known statement, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. He's saying that La hawla, there's no evading like sin except by the protection of Allah. Wala quwwata, and there's no strength or power to obey Allah except by the help of Allah. This is what Imam Ali is saying here. He's saying everything was created by qadar, even stupidity and intelligence, and to him is the will, and from him is the ability to do the good deeds or refrain from the bad deeds. MashaAllah. He says, so the slaves are driven to do what occurs from them by their choice, not by compulsion and coercion, like a stuck feather, the wind taking it left and right, as said by the Jabriya. So what we should understand from this is that the slaves, the human beings, are driven to do what occurs from them by what? By their choice. So the actions that the human beings do, they do those things by their own choice. They have their own will. They choose what to do. Okay? It says, not by compulsion and coercion. Okay, it's not the case that the human beings are being threatened. No one's putting a gun to someone's head and saying, cross the street right now. Okay, you choose to cross the street because it's your choice. Okay, you're not being compelled under a threat of death. Okay, and it's not coercion either. It's not the case that you don't have a will at all. Like your body is moving and you don't even, and you're not choosing to move it. Like your body moves and you don't know what's going on. Like you're some kind of action figure just being moved. No, it's not like that either. That's why it says here, like a stuck feather. You know, have you ever seen a feather that's just like floating in the air? It's stuck up there. It's not falling to the ground. It's just caught in the wind. It says, and the wind takes it left and right. You know, when the wind blows this way, the feather goes that way. When the wind blows the other way, the feather goes the other way. The feather doesn't have any choice about which way it's going. Okay? Here, Ali is saying it's not like that. Okay? It's not that the human being does not have a choice. No, humans make choices, and it's our own choices that push us to do the things that we do. We are not being compelled by some external force to act against our wills. And it's not the case that we don't even have a will, that the things we do are being done to us by something else. No. And that's what the Jabriya said. There's a group of, a misguided group of deviants. We call them the Jabriya. These people, they used to teach that the human does not have a will. They used to teach that human beings are like a feather in the wind. When the wind blows that way, it goes that way. When the wind blows that way, it goes that way. And it has no say, no choice at all. The Jabriya say that the humans are like that, but Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah says the humans are not like that. Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah says that the human being has a choice and Allah has a choice, but the will of the human is under the will of Allah. And we mentioned the ayah that I said earlier is a very important ayah to make sure we all know. وَمَا تَشَاءُونَ إِلَّا أَن يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ. Okay, you do not will except what Allah willed. Okay, or as the translator here said it, you do not will unless Allah willed. MashaAllah. So this is a good place for us to stop, insha'Allah ta'ala. Let's, if you have questions, put them in the box. I'll start reviewing questions now, insha'Allah. I think I saw one or two of them earlier. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah to those who salamed me. Someone asked, explain why Allah punishes someone for what Allah wills. He said, I don't understand. The answer to that, brother, is to understand that the human has a will of his own. Okay? And you can even think of your own life. Okay? When you stand up from the chair or couch you're sitting on, when you stand up, didn't you choose to stand up? Like in your own experience, do you feel that someone else stood you up? Or do you feel that you chose to stand up? When you go to the fridge to get a drink of water, do you feel that someone like made your body do those movements? Or do you feel that you chose to do those movements? Okay, I think all of us understand from our own experience that we are choosing to do these things. So the human being has a will. Okay, and it's our wills that we're being judged on. Okay, the actions that we do with our bodies, okay, most of those actions we chose to do. And the ones which we chose to do, those are the ones we're being judged on. Okay, some of the actions we do, we don't choose it. We're not being judged on those. Okay, like things you do while you're sleeping. You didn't will to do those things while you were sleeping, so you're not judged on it. My heart is beating right now. I'm not willing my heart to beat. It's just beating. I'm not being judged on that. Okay? But the words coming out of my mouth right now, I chose to say these words, and so I'm held accountable to them on the day of judgment. And the human being who chooses to do sinful, wicked things, Allah is just if he punishes that person. It doesn't matter that Allah willed for him to do those things. Okay, that human himself willed to do those things, and that's why he deserves punishment. Okay, the fact that Allah also willed him to do that is irrelevant. The slave himself has a will, and he directed his will towards doing foul and wicked things, and he deserves whatever punishment he gets. Okay, it's not the case that the human did not have a say in the matter, that Allah is the only one that willed what would happen, and he's punishing people for things that they didn't even will to do. That's not the case. The people in hell, they're being punished for the things that they chose to do. And it just so happens that Allah willed in eternity for them to do those things as well. And if Allah had not willed in eternity for them to do those things, they would not have been able to do them. Because the only things that occur are the things that Allah willed to happen. Okay, someone said, I need clarification in the area of abrogated ayahs. Okay. In the Quran, there are certain things that Allah does. Okay, Allah informs us of things. Okay, informs us, for example, of things that happened in the past. Informs us of things that will happen in the future. Informs us of his attributes. Informs us, like many of the things that we need to believe, things that pertain to Aqidah, they came in the Quran in the form of information. So one thing that Allah does in the Quran is inform us. Another thing that Allah does in the Quran is threaten us. Threatens us with hellfire if we die as kafirs or if we die as sinful Muslims. Another thing that Allah does in the Quran is promise us. Okay, he promises paradise to those who die as believers. Another thing that Allah does in the Quran is command us. Okay, command us to pay zakat, command us to go on Hajj, for example. And the fifth thing that Allah does in the Quran is forbid us. Forbid us from zina, forbid us from riba, for example. So Allah informs us, promises us, threatens us, commands us, and forbids us. These are 5 things that Allah does in the Quran. But the first 3 of these things cannot be abrogated. Okay? Because the information that Allah gives us is true. And truth is not something that can be abrogated. Okay, Allah says that there's not a thing with any similarity of any kind to him. Allah, okay, it's not the case that Allah could reveal after that that there are things similar to him and that the first ayah is somehow abrogated, like it's no longer the case that Allah has no similars. Okay, the reality of Allah does not change. So whatever information he says about himself, it's always going to be true. It's not something that could change. And whatever Allah informed us about is going to happen in the future, that the day of judgment is coming, that's not something that's subject to abrogation. The day of judgment is not going to stop coming. Okay? Allah informed us that paradise and hellfire exist and that these are places of reward and places of torture. Okay? That's not something that's subject to abrogation. Okay, the information Allah gave us, the promises and threats that Allah made, these things are not going to change. They're not subject to change. So what is subject to change? Just the last 2 things, the commands and the prohibitions. Allah might command us to pray 50 times a day. And then later give a different command to only pray 5 times a day. Allah might command us to face Jerusalem in Salat, and then later command us to face the Kaaba in Salat. You understand? Like commandments can be abrogated, meaning a later revelation might contain a commandment that renders the older commandment obsolete, meaning we follow the more recently revealed command and stop following the older one. That's what abrogation means. Commandments and prohibitions can be abrogated, even though most of them have not been abrogated. It is conceivable for a commandment to be abrogated. It's conceivable for a prohibition to be abrogated. It is not conceivable that the belief of the Muslims would be abrogated. Okay, it is not conceivable that, for example, in the past nations, prophets used to teach that Allah is an idol, but then in the nation of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah abrogated that teaching and started teaching that Allah has nothing similar to him. Okay, that is like inconceivable. It's nonsense. It's irrational. Okay, it doesn't make any sense. The truth is the truth. It's not going to change. Okay. All right. I think that's everything for today. Let's say La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات بارك الله فيكم. I'll see you inshallah next week at the normal time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.